And our reading this morning is from Malachi 3:10. It says, "Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord, if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing so great that you won't have enough room to take it in." Woohoo!
So Tom Brokaw, huh? So one time I was wearing those little brown round glasses, and I remember that one of the youth in the youth and family ministry came up and said, "Oh man, I love your glasses." And he was like about 11 at the time, and so I said, "Oh yeah, they're kind of cool. They look like Harry Potter, yes?" And he looks at me like incredulous, and he said, "Not Harry Potter, John Lennon." And I was like, "Excuse me." I didn't even know he knew John Lennon. So I guess inspiration come from all different kinds of places. So hopefully today this will be one place of inspiration for you in many different ways. And so I'm going to start off by telling you a secret. In truth, I did tell the first service, so you're not the first persons to hear this. But I am going to tell you a secret that our theme for next month is prosperity, abundance, and wealth. Right? And so, I thought since today was the 30th and tomorrow's the 1st, that it's pushing it a little bit, but I didn't think it would be pushing it too much if I thought that we could really powerfully step into that month by just beginning to talk about it today. It's only one day early, right? So my talk title today is Prove Me Now. Prove Me Now. And I'm sharing some ideas around the Bible verse from Malachi, the verse that Ruth read earlier. It says, just to remind you, "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord, if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing so great that you won't have room enough to take it in." Aren't you glad we don't talk like that anymore? I mean, really. And prove me now herewith. Anyway. Besides some laughter, what I realize that it may bring up within you some amount of resistance. And in fact, it might even bring up some amount of fear within some of us. But I would really be remiss if I did not speak about tithing, all right, a day before the month whose theme is prosperity, abundance, and wealth. We really have to go there. And so today I am going to go there, and I'm going to talk about it in a couple of different ways. One will be from a really traditional religious viewpoint, and the other from a more metaphysical viewpoint. And so what I just encourage everyone to do is to open your hearts and open your minds and allow for the possibility of a new idea of this thing called tithing to bubble up within each of you. I'm having a little trouble with this mic today. I feel like I'm eating it. Now, the Old Testament refers to tithing in many different ways, not only in Malachi. Under Levitican law during the time of Moses, the tithe was a form of taxation required by the Hebrews, a portion of the earth and a portion of their herds. But this wasn't where this idea of tithing actually originated. Some form of tithing was practiced almost universally across the entire ancient world. Now, the word tithe means tenth. And the ancient people believed that 10 was a magic number of increase. Catherine Ponder, in her book, Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, says, the ancient prosperity law is this: true prosperity has a spiritual basis. God is the source of your supply. Your mind, body, abilities, talents, education, experience, job, or profession are all instruments and channels of your prosperity, but God is the source. Therefore, you must do something definite and consistent with this rich source if you want to be continuously prospered. Now, in Malachi, it says, prove me now. It is a call to action, and that action is to tithe. And the verse promises that if we do, heaven will pour out a blessing so large that we won't have room enough to take it in. Edwene Gaines, who is one of the premier speakers and teachers about prosperity, says in her book, The Four Spiritual Laws of Prosperity, clearly states this spiritual law when she says you must tithe 10% of all that you receive to the person, place, or institution where you receive your spiritual food. 10% of all that you receive. This means 10% of all money that we receive, all financial income, salaries, bonuses, interest earned, monetary gifts, dividends, proceeds from the sale of a house, and all of the money that we win, inherit, or find on the street. 2, the person, place, or institution where we receive our spiritual food. Now, spiritual food is that which inspires us, that which teaches us, that which reminds us of the truth and causes us to remember who we really are, reminds us and creates an awareness within us of the true divinity, the inner divinity that we are. Spiritual, the promise is that if we tithe, right? If we tithe, that we prove God in our lives and that the heavens will open up to us. So, I really know what this brings up in us. I've been there. Now, while I am a tither now, I wasn't always a tither. I felt that resistance. I felt that fear. You want me to do what? Is that on the gross or is that on the net? Now, Edwene Gaines would say, well, how much money, how much good do you want to get? A little or a lot? You don't want to mess with Edwene Gaines. She's very clear, very, very clear, and in fact, even very adamant about the subject. She doesn't mince words. She says that we can't just talk about it, we can't just read about it, that we have to do it in spite of our fears. And she would even say that we should tithe when the bills can't even be paid. And she gives examples from her own life in which she did just that, in which she tithed when she didn't even know where the next meal for herself and her daughter was coming from. She talks about how tithing works in her experience of prosperity. But she very clearly also says, don't trust her, trust God. Tithe first and trust that God will assist in the paying of the bills. So think about it. Have you ever really looked at our currency? Do you think that there is any underlying reason in the fact that each and every denomination of our money contains the words, "In God we trust"? I just got goosebumps. Now, what will happen after we've been tithing for a little while is that supply will start to come from all sorts of strange places, places that we would never have expected that supply to come from. I know many people that could tell stories about that. And the income will just keep increasing. And an energy of excitement will seep in as we begin to eagerly anticipate more money coming in so that we are able to send more out. It's exciting. When a person commits to tithing, something inside of them shifts. Something inside of them works differently from that moment on. Conditions may or may not immediately change on the physical plane, but inside, on the mental, spiritual, and emotional plane, something has happened. Something has shifted. And it can work wonders for us in our lives. Now, the truth is that faith expands when we give. And the more we give, the more faith we have, and the more we are able to really know that we cannot outgive God, as Emerson was once quoted as saying. We cannot outgive God. Once we've been tithing for a few months, we have to literally prepare to receive this flow of good that is coming into our lives. We have to prepare for it. We have to ready ourselves for it. We have to be willing to accept it. Really dare to claim that good. It's our birthright. Each and every single one of us in here is worthy of all of the good that we could possibly accept. Now remember that faith is a choice. We can choose whether to have faith or not. We can choose whether to believe that the law of tithing is true, and we can choose whether we believe that God is our source. It is our choice. If we look back at the Bible, most specifically in the New Testament, in the New Testament, we would see that Jesus never really talked about tithing. But what he did talk about, what he did teach about, was giving. Specifically, he said, "Give, and it shall be given unto you in good measure, pressed down and shaken together and running over. For with the same measure that ye mete, it shall be measured to you again." So in giving, we are not giving anything away. We are giving way to the flow of God. We are giving way to the flow of good in our lives. We are powerfully stepping into the law of circulation, the law of giving and receiving. True giving is not something that we do to or for someone, but it is our consent to allow the flow of God, the flow of good to flow through our lives. It is our consent. There's an old saying that says, when things get tight, something's got to give. And that something is each one of us. If we hoard our time, talent, and treasure, we are really literally saying no to the flow of good in our lives. When we give, we are saying yes to life. Yes. While the emphasis on tithing in the strictest sense of the word is about what we give and to whom we give it to, the most important thing about giving in general is, what are we giving from? Are we giving from a consciousness of lack and limitation, or are we giving from a consciousness that knows that the universe is abundant and that it is God's good pleasure to give us the kingdom of heaven on earth? If we give to get something, then our giving is dependent upon getting that something back. And if we don't get it back, then we will be depleted. If we give out of a sense of duty, we will be depleted. But if we give out of the fullness of our hearts from a cup that runneth over with love and gratitude, then we will receive the blessings that giving has to offer. We will be blessed. On that, you can be sure. Eric Butterworth, in his book, In the Flow of Life, states, "We are forever in the presence of an infinite and eternal energy from which all things proceed. Thus, it is never for lack of life, substance, intelligence, or love that we experience difficulties, but because we are out of the flow of life." And one of the most effective ways of getting back into the flow is through giving. We may have been thinking lack, thinking get, or the need to get. Now we must think give. There's a story about a beggar who has been working his way through town without much success. And then one morning he happens to notice on the horizon that the golden coach of the king, being driven by magnificent-looking horses, is approaching him. He became excited, thinking that surely his struggle was about to end, that truly the king would grant him prosperity. Much to his disappointment, when the king did stop, the king asked him what he, the beggar, could give him. Now, the beggar thought he was kind of insane, because what could an old beggar give the one who has everything already? But he reached into his satchel and he took out 1 grain of sand, 1 grain amidst a whole satchel filled with grains of sand, grains of corn. That didn't make any sense, did it? With grains of corn. And he gave it to the king with consternation. Later that day, he took his satchel and he emptied it out onto the ground. And much to his amazement, he saw that 1 grain of corn had turned into gold. And the beggar wept, wishing that he had given the king all of it. So what I encourage each of us to really know today is that the experience of abundance and prosperity is not about our outer circumstances. It is not about the stuff or the money that we have or do not have in our bank accounts or in our satchels. But instead, the experience of abundance and prosperity is determined by our inner state. We talk about this all the time here, as within, so without. We create our outer lives, the world of form, from our inner state. Now, when we give from an inner state that is steeped in God consciousness, that is in alignment with the flow of life, then giving and receiving are one and the same. The blessing and the blessed are one. Now, Reverend Christian Sorensen says, you can continue your search for supply, peace, gratitude, health, or eternality, and you might come across some. Or you can give up searching and the sense of separation and rest in your true identity as the prodigal son who returns home in consciousness to what has always been yours. Prove me now, saith the Lord. Throughout time, this verse has been taken quite literally as the tithing of money or bounty from the harvest, 10% of all that we receive. So the invitation today is to simply try it. Give it a try. And let the law of tithing, let God prove it in your life. This morning, I also invite each of us to look at this idea from a more metaphysical perspective. Prove me now, saith the Lord. Metaphysically, the Lord means the law, the spark of the divine, or the creative power within each of us. Prove me now is the demonstration of the way that it works. The creative power of God on the macro level, and the creative power of each and every single one of us on the micro level. It is a call to action, a call to demonstrate the law of cause and effect, the law of attraction, the law of giving and receiving, or whatever else we want to call it. Think of the storehouse as the subjective consciousness, or the undifferentiated stuff from which all things are made. So the storehouse is really literally this middle section of our Science of Mind teaching symbol. It is it is that undifferentiated stuff of which all things are made. So whatever we put into that storehouse is what we will reap. Whatever we put into that storehouse will be the experience of our lives. Now, way back in ancient times, when the farmer tithed, he put 10% of his harvest back into the soil. He knew that whatever he sowed, he would reap, nothing more and nothing less. He also took really great care to clean the seeds before he put them into the storehouse, because he wanted whatever he put into that storehouse to be as clean and as pure as possible. He wanted to know exactly what was going into that storehouse. Now, when he took great care in that way, when he sowed wheat, he reaped wheat and nothing else. When he sowed corn, he reaped corn and nothing else. And so it is with each one of us. The whole tithe that we place into the storehouse includes our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, and our attitudes. It also includes our love, our peace, our joy, and our compassion. What we place into the storehouse, that soil of the creative process, is what we shall reap. It's the only way that it can be. If we want more love in our life, the invitation is to be more loving. If we want more peace in our life, the invitation is to be more peaceful. Be mindful, just like the farmer, of what it is that we are actually placing into that storehouse. Be conscious of it. So much of what we place into that storehouse is done unconsciously. But we can choose to do it consciously. When our consciousness is filled with thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and attitudes of lack and limitation, then our experience of life is one of lack and limitation. When our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and attitudes are those of abundance and prosperity, then our experience of life is one of abundance and prosperity. The invitation is to put only those thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and attitudes that we wish to experience into the storehouse, because the law always works with mechanical regularity. It can't say yes to some seeds and no to others. It can only say yes. So it would really behoove us to pay attention to what we are asking it to say yes to. Metaphysically, this Bible verse could be a call to action, a call or an opportunity to really prove the creative law or the creative process in our lives. Malachi 3:10 goes on to say, "If I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing so great that you will not have room enough to take it in." Eric Butterworth says about this part, the crux of the statement in Malachi is, "I will open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing." This is usually quoted to indicate that if you tithe, everything in heaven and earth will fall into your lap. But how conveniently, in this instance, it is forgotten that heaven is not up there. Jesus clearly states that the kingdom of heaven is within you. It is not a place in space, but an inner potentiality of imprisoned splendor that is released through you. Released through you. Thus the windows of heaven are in you. The windows of heaven are you. You are the windows of heaven, and you will be poured out as a blessing. Wow. The bottom line is that God can only do for us what God can do through us. The receiving is always a greater flow from within, a greater flow from within that goes outward out into the world. We become the blessing. And the underlying truth is that the blessing that we become is more than sufficient to deal with any situation we should encounter and to meet any and all requirements that we might have. More than sufficient. So however we look at this idea of tithing, putting God first in the matter of our finances, trusting that we live in an abundant universe, rendering a 10% portion of that which is already God's back to God, knowing that we can't give God, or standing firmly grounded in the way that the law works, the way that the creative process works, knowing that as it is given, so it shall be received, that as it is sown, so shall it be reaped, that whatever we place into the storehouse of our consciousness will be the experience of our lives. We have a choice in the matter. So the invitation is to choose wisely. The invitation is for each of us to tithe consciously, mindfully, with faith, with love, with joy, and with gratitude, and then to be ready to receive the blessing that will be poured unto us. Prove me now, saith the Lord. And so it is. And so it is. Please turn within. With my eyes closed and my attention turned inward, I am really acutely aware of the power and presence of God that is within me and surrounding me. I know that it is first cause, that it is that which created everything, seen and unseen. I know that it is the very essence of abundance and prosperity. I know that it created me in its image and likeness, so that right where I am, God is in its fullness, in its wholeness. And just as I know that that is my truth, I know that it is absolutely true for each and every person here this morning, each and every person within the sound of my voice, that each of us is a unique and divine expression of the divine and ambassador of its presence on the planet, here to bring forward all that we are to the world. And it is from that place of unity, this deep and abiding connection between God and ourselves and between each other, that I speak this word of prayer for each of us this morning, individually and collectively as the Triangle Center for Spiritual Living, knowing that we are spiritual beings having a human incarnation, that we are imbued with everything that we need to live the life of our dreams, to create a world that works for everyone. That however we look at this idea of tithing from either a traditional religious viewpoint or from a metaphysical viewpoint, that we are experiencing even now as I speak this prayer, an ease and grace around stepping into it, stepping into this idea, putting God first in the matter of our finances, or standing firmly grounded in the way that the creative process works, using it consciously, tithing gratefully, knowing that as we do so, our inner consciousness is changed. And because that inner consciousness has changed, that inner consciousness has shifted, our outer experience also changes, also shifts. That we can, as Michael sang, change our lives. That each and every brand new baby day is a new opportunity to create again, to choose again, to consciously create, to use this idea of tithing powerfully in our lives. And so I claim an experience of abundance. I claim an experience of prosperity. I claim an ability to prove me now. And I'm so grateful to know this truth and to speak these words. So grateful for the power of prayer, knowing that these words are loosed into a law that only ever says yes, that my words are clothed in form the minute they are spoken. And so I speak them and I release them with love and gratitude and full expectation of their manifestation, letting go and letting God be God. And I invite each of us to anchor this prayer for ourselves and for each other simply by saying, "And so it is, and so it is."